1. So let's look at how it is done. So how do you acquire the lock? You read the value of the lock, which we are indicating by location here. So they read the value of the lock into register 1. And then it will try to execute store conditional. And in store conditional, it will try to modify this value to value which has already been stored in register 2. So whatever is stored in register 2 will be stored at location. But this will happen only if there has not been done any other store conditional by any other process. So if any other process has executed store conditional in between, so naturally this process will receive a 0. So register 2 value would be equal to 0. So if register 2 value equal to 0, it means the store conditional has failed. It means this process has failed to acquire the lock. So it will again continue in this loop. So it will jump back to L1. So it will continue this load link store conditional operation till it acquires the lock. If it acquires the lock, naturally it will go to the next instruction. So it is as good as it has entered the critical section. When it wants to release the lock, then the lock value will be changed back to 0. So naturally we are assuming here that lock equal to 0, it means it is available, and if it is 1, it is locked. So but this location could be any other value. So basically release lock will bring it back to the old value. So old value indicates that the lock is available, and when this is replaced by a new value, it means the so this is how this load link scenario will work. So now if you look at it in this load link, okay. So this is how the critical section will be implemented in this scenario. Another hardware solution is to disable the interrupt. Now what happens when does a process lose a control of CPU? When the context switch happens. And context switch happens only when this process has completed its quantum, means a timer interrupt has been received, or this process has to do some input output interrupt has been received, or this process has been preempted by another process or operating system because of the preemptive or priority scheduling. So the idea is that all these 3 events will happen only if some kind of interrupt or external event occurs. So the idea is that disable the interrupt, and then the process can continue its code. And when it has completed the code it wanted to execute, then it will enable the interrupt. So before it enters the critical section, interrupts are disabled, and once the critical section has been executed, then interrupts can be enabled. So disabling interrupt and enabling interrupt can provide a solution to this critical section problem. So interrupt disable would be equivalent to acquiring lock, and interrupt enable will be equivalent to releasing lock. Is that right? But what could be the challenges? Challenges is depending upon what processes are sharing, and what kind of resource or what kind of resource is being shared, and what kind of processing is being done on that resource, critical section can be quite long. So if you're disabling interrupts for a long period of time, it may not be desirable because it is going to delay handling of external events such as input-output request processing. It will naturally, if it is disabled, it is not going to receive timer interrupts, so CPU scheduling would be affected. One process may monopolize CPU for a very, very long time, and other processes may be starved. So it could actually affect the outcome of your or performance of your system. Naturally, it will affect preemptive scheduling. So a low priority process may continue while a high priority process might be waiting. May not be desirable in many circumstances. Then, if you are having multi-core processors or multi-processor within the system, then you can enable or disable interrupt for a particular core or for a particular processor. All the processors may not be affected, and if you are actually disabling interrupt for all the processors, it may actually bring the performance, may actually reduce performance drastically. So this interrupt enable disable mechanism for implementing locks may not be effective for multiprocessors. Then there is a security issue. Do we allow a user process to disable interrupt? If yes, then this process can actually monopolize CPU. It will not yield CPU to any other process, and it could lead to problem. And sometimes it may not be a problem per se. Some user might have inserted infinite code. It might be a bug, and the interrupts may not be enabled back. Or some of the times, so the problem is that if there is an incorrect implementation, so interrupts may be disabled forever, and OS may not be able to get control of the CPU. So this could be a problem. So naturally, we have another solution. Now, using hardware interrupts or enabling, disabling interrupts could be very, very problematic. So rather, we will go for solutions which are slightly at higher abstraction. And these solutions are provided in the form of mutex and semaphores. These are basically data structures which are implemented by operating system to facilitate execution of certain instructions as if they are being done atomically without any interruption. So of course, there might be interruption in between, but still the critical section will be accessed by one process at a time. So we talk about mutex. So basically, this is a locking mechanism and supports two functions: acquire a lock and release a lock. And of course, there is a Boolean variable which will show the availability of the lock. So basically, it's a data structure which will be having a value true or false. So, and two functions, which is firing lock and releasing the lock. And both of these functions are atomic. So through these functions may consist of multiple machine instructions, but operating system will ensure that they are executed as if they are being, as if they are atomic. So naturally, for implementing these functions, operating system will take support of hardware to ensure that these locks are implemented correctly. So now if you want to write a critical section, so it is very, very simple. You acquire the lock, then execute the code corresponding to the critical section, and then release the lock. Okay. Now let's look at the solution. Will actually be, let's look at this. So basically, initialization would be that we are using a mutex, which is available. Available is equal to false. And when we want to acquire the lock, we are actually checking whether the available is true or false. If the available is true, means some other process has acquired the lock, then this particular loop will not be. So the very first process which comes across this loop, and if available equal to true, then this will come out of the loop and will set available equal to false to ensure that other processes cannot execute. In fact, initially it should be true. I'm sorry. Okay. So available equal to true means lock is available. The lock is available. So the very first process which gets to execute this acquire function is atomic. I told you that so to implement this function, operating system will be using this test and set condition to ensure that other processes cannot access it. So we discussed that implementation in the last class. This was the implementation. So behind the scenes, operating system will be using this to ensure that lock is acquired by only one process. Okay. So initially the lock is available. So the very first process which gets to execute acquire will find that lock is available. So it will actually set it to false. Now all other processes will be now waiting in this loop till the lock becomes available. So this will require busy wait, means waste of CPU cycles. And if you want to implement the critical section, acquire lock, execute critical section, release lock, then the processes can do whatever remainder section it wants to do. So one way to implement the lock would be using interrupt enabling and disabling mechanism. So the idea is that in acquire lock, the very first instruction that is executed is disable interrupt. So now whatever the code is executed, now it can be executed without any interruption. So it will be atomic mode. And now the process will check whether the lock value is equal to 0 or not. If the lock value equal to 0, it means it is available, it will actually make it non-available and then enable the interrupt. So the process has acquired the lock. And when it is releasing the lock, it will disable the interrupt, lock value equal to 0, enable the interrupt, and so on. Now, what could go wrong here? So let's say the first process, which was acquiring the lock, somehow. So let's say the first process acquires the lock, but now the other processes, now the second process gets the chance and it disables the interrupt. Now the lock has been acquired, but this process cannot get the lock, so it continues in the while loop. And because interrupts are disabled, this process cannot be context switched. So the problem could be that other process which has actually acquired the lock may not get chance to release the lock, and this process will continue infinitely. So it will actually create a situation in which this process is continuously running on the CPU without yielding any result, and it is actually not coming out of the CPU because it is not receiving any interrupt. So CPU doesn't know whether this process is doing useful work or not, so this process will continue. And the process which has acquired the lock can also not continue because it is not getting chance to run on CPU. So this could actually create a problem. So the interrupts may be disabled forever. So the second implementation of the mutex using interrupts could be that during acquire lock, the interrupts are disabled. Then the process checks whether lock value is available or not. And then it enables the interrupts. The idea is that this is to break that interrupts are not disabled forever. So the first process will find that the lock value equal to 0. So it will not enter the while loop. It will set the lock value to 1 and enable the interrupt. But the second process, which is not able to acquire the lock, it will be going through the cycle of, it will enable interrupt, disable interrupt, enable interrupt, disable interrupt. So naturally, because once this enables the interrupt, it's quite possible it will be context switched. So through it will consume CPU cycles, but it will ensure that the other processes are not. So this process does not, the process which has failed to acquire the lock does not monopolize CPU. So CPU is actually, so the other processes are also able to progress. So this is a kind of spin lock in which the process is spinning on the lock and is not doing anything useful, but doing busy waiting. So this implementation is correct, but the problem would be too much time spent on the on enabling and disabling interrupt. So third scenario is the process disables the interrupt, checks the lock value. The very first process which finds that the lock value equal to is not equal to 0 comes out, sets lock value equal to 1 and enable interrupt. So it has acquired the lock. But what happens to the process which has not acquired the lock? It will again check the lock value equal to 0. So it will get itself queued. So it will enter into a queue waiting for the lock to be available, and then it will yield. Yield means it is giving CPU voluntarily. Okay, and let's say that yield will also enable the interrupt. Okay, so yield is actually giving up CPU to so it is a kind of a system call. So the control goes to the operating system. So it will actually ensure that interrupts are again enabled back. The process which has acquired the lock will, when it executes the release function, it will again disable the interrupts because we said that lock is being modified here. So it is a critical section. And then if there is any other process waiting on that lock and it is in the queue, it will dequeue one of the process and set the lock value to available again. This is how release lock will work. So it would be avoiding the busy wait cycle. The only problem in this case is, do we allow the user code to disable the interrupt? So naturally, user code will not be allowed to do that. So disable interrupt, enable interrupt should be through system calls. But then we have to ensure that this system call returns the control to the user process, and user process is able to run the critical section. So let's look at one of the problems which will require us to use mutex. If there is any question till now, I'll take it. Any questions? So I'll presume that all of you are following it. I'll be posting these slides today on the classroom. Okay, so too much milk problem, also known as two cookies problem, is very simple problem. There are two friends who are sharing a house, and they have a fridge, one fridge, and both of them are fond of milk, so there should always be milk in the fridge. So naturally, if there is no milk in the fridge, so one of them should go and buy 2 bottles of milk and put them into the fridge. Now, because they are also putting many other things in the fridge, so there is room for only 2 bottles. So if they end up buying more bottles, so this will be just a waste. So they do not want to waste money, and so they want to ensure that if the fridge is empty, it should be stocked with 2 bottles of milk. Now, let's say these friends have different office times. So generally they don't get time to meet each other. So they have to communicate by posting some notes to convey the message. So naturally one friend is working in the daytime, another friend is working in the nighttime, so they don't get to see each other. So let's start from this. So how do we find the solution? So solution is, of course, they are leaving the notes. So what will happen, if there is no note and if there is no milk, then so the very first person who is checking that there is no note and there is no milk will leave the note and then go out to the market to buy milk, put the milk in the fridge, and then remove the note. This is how both the friends, this is the protocol they have agreed upon. So if there is no note and there is no milk, leave note, go and buy milk, remove note, and that's all. Do you think this is a good solution? Hello? Aditya Kumawat, is it a good solution? So what could happen? Let's say the friend 1 wakes up, goes to the fridge, finds there is no note, open the fridge, find there is no milk, and goes out to buy the milk. But before it could buy the milk, the other friend has returned from his office and he finds again there is no note, there is no milk, so he also goes to buy the milk. So both of the friends bring the milk, 2 bottles of milk, and this will lead to waste. So there's too much milk. So this is the problem with this solution. So let's try to improve this solution. Let's come to the solution number 2. Okay, so the point is, let's say, okay, let me rephrase the question. The first friend comes, checks there is no note, and then there's no milk. And let's say he wants to leave the note, and then but he doesn't have the pen. So he goes into the room. The second friend comes, he finds there's no note, there's no milk, and he also puts a note, but he also goes to get the pen. And let's say both the friends, they put the note, but they do not watch each other. So one of them is putting a note on one side of the fridge, and another one is putting the note on the second side of the fridge, and then they go independently. So this can happen. Actually, the idea is here that if you look at it in the context of processes, so leave note, no note is actually checking certain variable for some value, and then leave note is actually modifying this value. So in between this, a context which can take place. So here also the situation can take place. Let's say both the friends are on the opposite sides of their rooms are on the opposite sides. So one friend is leaving note on one side of the fridge, another friend is leaving a note on another side of the fridge, and they might not observe that there is already a note, and they can go to the market. So they can have too much milk. So this is quite possible. Okay. So let's try to go to the solution number 2. So what happens that now to avoid this problem, they change the protocol. So that you leave your note first, and then check whether I have posted note or not, and then you check the milk, and if there is no milk, then you go and buy it, otherwise remove your note. So instead of no note, they are actually relying on presence of the note. So the friend A, so whenever they check the fridge, before checking the fridge, they put their note. Okay. So friend A leaves the note, then opens the fridge, then check whether B has posted the note or not. So leaving note is like who is checking the fridge kind of scenario. So A leaves the note, then see that there is no other note from the B, and then check there is no milk and goes and buy the milk, and then remove its note. Similarly, B follows the same scenario, leave note B, if no note A, if no milk, and buy milk, and then they remove the note. Now what could go wrong? So both the friends come and they put the notes. So A puts the note, and then before he wants to check that whether B has posted the note or not, let's say someone rings the bell. So naturally B also comes, B also puts the note. And then what they find? They find that A finds that B has posted the note, B finds that A has posted the note. So naturally both of them do not check the fridge because they assume that other one has checked the fridge and milk is available, and they remove the note, and then they repeat the process. So it could lead to a situation where there will be no milk in the fridge. Any questions till now? Let's go to solution number 3. So A leaves note. Then as long as B has posted the note, it does nothing. Now if there is no milk, it goes and buy milk and then remove its note. B leaves note. If there is no note of A, it will just remove its note. But if there is a note of, B leaves note, and if A has also left note, it just removes its note. Otherwise, if A has not left the note, then it will check that there is no milk and then buy the milk. So this is comment X and comment Y. So let's say what happens. So A leaves the note, someone rings the bell, comes back and check whether B has left the note or not. If B has not left note in the between, it will check whether the milk is available or not. And if the milk is not available, it will buy it. But if B has left the note, so now, and actually if there is a note of B, then A will keep on, A will do nothing. It will continue in this loop. It will, as long as the B has posted the note, it will not do anything. So now, okay, what could happen? What could happen is that either A can come and leave the note first, or B can come and leave the note first. Okay, so one of them will be leaving the note first, and other person is checking. B is checking, A is checking whether B, as long as B has posted the note, it will do nothing. So if A leaves the note and B does not appear on the scene, then A will go and buy the milk. But if A has left note, and in between the A was interrupted because of something and B has left the note, so when A resumes, it finds that B has already kept the note here, so it will do nothing. But when B checks, it will find that A has left the note, so it will remove its note. So ultimately, A will end up buying the milk in this scenario. If A does not leave any note, then B will end up buying the scenario. So this is how this solution will work, and this solution will be okay. But this is actually a complicated solution. But if we use locks, the solution is simplified. Just acquire the lock. If there's no milk, buy milk and release the lock. And because this is an atomic instruction, so naturally A cannot be interrupted while doing it. कि नोट लिखना है तो नोट नहीं है तो पेपर लाऊं, पेन लाऊं, जितने बी ने कुछ लिख दिया और मैंने ध्यान नहीं दिया क्योंकि मैं जल्दी जल्दी में था, तो वो वाली प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पे नहीं आएगी. So mutex can actually, through mutex you can acquire the lock, and it can simplify this kind of scenario where some activity has to be done by two processes, but only one of the process should be doing that activity at a time. But there are some limitations. This can be used for implementing mutual exclusion only. We cannot use it for event synchronization. So which process should go into the critical section? At what point a process goes into the critical section? What if a process has to wait for another process? So we will have another synchronization mechanism, which we'll be calling semaphore. So semaphore is, again, it actually supports both locking as well as signaling mechanism. So what happens when we want event synchronization? So process A is carrying some activity, and after this activity has been completed, only then B can start. So naturally, so what will happen? B will make itself sleep, and what A will do, when it has completed the activity, it will wake up process B. So generally, wake up process B is like sending a signal to B to wake up. So this is called a signaling mechanism. So a semaphore will actually support both locking as well as signaling mechanism. So semaphore is a synchronization variable. It is a data structure which consists of an integer value and a queue. So all the processes which are waiting for some event to happen on the semaphore will be queued, and this is how it will work. And it will also support two methods known as, different books will refer to this method as different. Most modern books actually use wait and signal. But if you go to the earlier books, they will actually call it down or up, or they will call it P and V. So the original concept was given by Dijkstra, and he used the operations P and V. So P is equivalent to wait is equivalent to down, and V is equivalent to signal is equivalent to up. So semaphore value could be either positive or negative. So semaphore could be integer or binary. If it's an integer, then the value could be positive or negative. So generally, integer semaphores will be used when you want to have multiple instances of the same resource and you want to share it among the processes. Whereas, and a negative value indicates how many processes are waiting for the resource. So we'll continue from here. So binary semaphore, the value can be 0 or 1. If the value is 1, the wait operation will decrement it, and other wait operation will decrement it, and signal operation will increment it back to 0. So if a process tries to execute wait, if the semaphore value is 0, it has to go to sleep. It will be made to sleep. Or it will be busy waiting. But busy waiting will consume CPU cycles, so we prefer that it goes to sleep. Counting semaphores are used for both signaling as well as resource sharing. So the value is an integer, and naturally if the value is 4, the very first process comes and decrements the value while executing wait. Now the value becomes 3. The other process will come, it will make it 2. Then next process will come, it will make it 1, and next process will come and make it 0. So ultimately 4 processes, they will not be blocked because the semaphore value was positive. But the last process, the 5th process, will make it from 1 to 0. We will find that the semaphore value is 0, so it has to go to sleep. So except for the first 4 processes, all the subsequent processes will have to go to sleep. Now, if one of the process which has actually which was executing executes a signal operation, so there are 3 processes which are running and many processes which are waiting on the semaphore. So out of these processes, one will be waken up, and then again, so at any given time there can be at most 4 processes which might be working on their critical section, or which might be using the resource. So spin version is like a busy wait version. In this particular case, the process will be waiting rather than going to sleep. So in this particular case, the process will first of all check what is the value of the semaphore. If it is negative or less than or equal to 0, it will wait. Otherwise, it will decrement the value of the semaphore. And naturally, because once it has decremented the value of the semaphore and it is not waiting, it can continue to the next instruction. In signal is always very simple. It is just incrementing the value. So this solution will ensure that the value of the semaphore at any given time is always non-negative. It is greater than 0. So it's greater than or equal to 0. But this scenario, when whenever process gets scheduled and it finds that semaphore is less than or equal to 0, so it will consume CPU cycles without doing any productive work. So this is not a good solution. Just a minute, I'll have to take this call. Interruption. Now this is the blocked version of the semaphore in which the process will be blocked, means made to sleep. So naturally it will not consume the cycle. So what will happen in this particular case, the process will first decrement the value, check whether the value is less than 0 or not, and then this process is added to the queue and put to the sleep. Now in this particular case, if you find that value of the semaphore can go negative. So a negative value indicates that there are processes which are sleeping on the semaphore. And what the signal process does, signal process will increment the value. And if this value is less than 0, it means there's still some processes which are waiting on this. So these processes need to be woken up. Now, in some cases, in some operating system, the processes will be put into a queue in first in, first out manner, and then process will be taken out from the queue in the same manner. So naturally, so one process will be woken up at a time. But in other operating system, whenever the process is put to the queue, whenever the wake up signal comes, all the processes in the queue would be woken up. So naturally, in this particular case, the processes will not be decrementing the value. They will actually check whether the value is greater than or equal to 0 or not. And then only put them to, so if the value is equal to 0, then they will put them to sleep, but they will not decrement the value of the semaphore. And the signal will increment the value of the semaphore, and it will check if the value is equal to 1, then it will wake up all the processes which are sleeping on that. Now, so there are two different versions here. Okay, so in the first version, what we are doing, each process will decrement the value of the semaphore, then check whether this is less than 0. If less than 0, it will go to sleep. Otherwise, it will continue. And when the signal comes, the process will increment the semaphore. And if the value of the semaphore is still less than or equal to 0, one process from the queue will be taken and woken up. Okay, but Linux doesn't do that. Linux actually wakes up all the processes. So what happens in this particular scenario? In this particular scenario, we will not be executing this. So the process comes, checks the semaphore value. If the semaphore value equal to 0, the process will go to sleep. And in signaling, the process value will be incremented. And if this is will be incremented, and then if there are any processes which are waiting on the semaphore, all of them will be woken up. The problem with this approach is that in this particular case, when the processes, let's say on the semaphore, two processes go to sleep, process A and process B. When we are waking them up, you cannot guarantee which of these two processes will be scheduled first. B may get chance first, then A. So this first in, first out order may not be observed. And why this is important? This is important when we'll be talking about readers-writers problem. This difference is significant. Now, the semaphores can be used to synchronize the events. Let's try to understand how. Let's say we want to execute these processes A and B, but the condition is that statement G can be executed only after B has been executed. And statement D can be executed only after statement H has been executed. And statement E should be executed before the execution of statement M begins. So this is what we want to do. So how do we ensure it? Let's try to look at the first scenario. So this is what we want to do, that statement B should be executed before statement G, and statement D should be executed only after H has been executed. And E should be executed before the statement M. Now here C can be executed anywhere, we do not care. But only thing is that we have to synchronize B and J, we have to synchronize H and D, and we have to synchronize E and M. So how do we do that? So let's look at the first scenario. So what happens before the process B executes statement G, it will wait on S1. And S1 equal to 0, so naturally this process will go to sleep. And process A, it will signal S1, means it will increase the value of semaphore and wake up all the processes which are sleeping on it only after executing B. So this will ensure, so using wait in one process and using signal in another process and ensuring that the semaphore value is equal to 0 will achieve event synchronization. So because the semaphore value equal to 0, so if B comes to statement G before A has executed B, it will go to sleep. Otherwise, B will wake up. Let's say A gets executed, B gets executed, and signal S1 gets executed. So in that particular case, the value of S1 will become 1. So naturally, when process B comes to wait, it need not continue. So it need not go to sleep because S1 is already equal to 0. So this scenario will only, so this scenario will ensure that G will be executed only after B. Similarly, second statement is that D can be executed only after statement H. So we use another semaphore and do it like this. Then E should be executed before statement this, so we'll be doing it like this. Can we recycle the semaphore? We should not try to do that, because if we use recycle here, signal S1 and signal S1, we could be in the trouble, because quite possibly B might not have been executed and C may be executed. So if you are recycling the semaphores, using the same semaphore again, you have to actually keep in the mind that the processes are asynchronous. They might not be scheduled in the way you are thinking. So to be on safer side, it is better to use different semaphores. So this is a home assignment. You have to put the condition variable so that these conditions can be met. Any questions till now? Okay, there was a question. This is an interesting question. Nitin Kumar. He says, Madam, in the milk problem, if A goes to market and gets lost, in case of infinite process, how does it stop? Well, that is always a problem in the concurrent processes. If one of the processes dies unexpectedly while in the critical section, then it will not be releasing the lock and it could be a problem. So yes, this is a problem. We do not know how to solve it. Only thing is that operating system can garbage collect locks after some time. That's a solution. It is just like, for example, you're sending a packet from here to Gmail, and while the packet was buffered at one of the router and could be forwarded to the next destination, that router was stolen or that router goes out of the power, what do? The packet will be lost here. It will be lost. There's no other solution here. So yes, if there are, the main assumption here is that yes, machines are running and machines are not facing any power failure. So the processes will keep on running, or the processes are not abnormally terminating. So that is what we are assuming. But if a process abnormally terminates, generally it will be raising an exception to the operating system, and then operating system will clean up after that process. And one of the cleanup operation would be releasing all the resources which were acquired by that process. So the same thing will be so if you were talking in the context of the computer science, then A goes to market is equivalent to a process going missing. Process is lost. Process is lost only if it is abnormally terminated. So OS will clean up here and then ensure that the resources become available. So infinite postponement will not take place in the real in that scenario. But in real scenario, A and B can again, so there could be a timing mechanism to solve this problem. So A can go to the market, and if B finds that A has not returned by this much time, or they can put a time on the note, and B can check that note is so old and why A has not come yet. So he or she can try to solve this problem by calling the police or checking with the market whether A has come there or not, whether A bought the milk or not. So yes, this can be done that way. Is that okay, Nitin? So if we want to solve the critical section problem, we can make use of binary semaphore. Binary semaphore is something like acquiring lock. So wait is like acquiring lock and signal is like releasing lock. Is that right? So that's how it can be done. So generally, if you look at the binary semaphore, it is acting like a mutex. It is ensuring mutual exclusion. And mutex is used for implementing locks. Generally, this is a locking mechanism. So acquire lock and release lock. Semaphores, if you are talking about integer semaphores, they can be used for resource, can be used when there are multiple resources. They can be used as signaling mechanism. So when you use semaphores as a condition variable, means you call wait in one process and signal in another process. So this is a kind of signaling mechanism. Mutex cannot be used for this kind of signaling mechanism. And generally, in case of mutex, acquire lock and release lock is always executed by the same process. Whereas in case of the semaphore, wait and signal may be executed by different processes. They can be executed by the same processes when we are talking about, but they can be executed by different processes. So they are executed by the same processes when we are talking about critical section handling, that is mutual exclusion. But if you want to go for signaling mechanism, they can be executed by different processes. So now we'll come to the problem called producer-consumer problem. So producer-consumer problem is a problem in which a producer is writing items onto a buffer and consumer is reading item from that buffer. So one of the practical scenario would be a processor sending a file to the printer and printer printing that file. So printer capacity may not be very high. So naturally, the files are sent from the processor byte by byte, and the printer is printing it. So this is the producer-consumer scenario. Okay. So we have a buffer. So naturally, buffer will be maintained as a first in, first out queue. So you do not want, when you are printing, you do not want second line to be printed before first line. So they have to be printed in the same sequence. So it should be first in, first out scenario. So the producer is producing, it will be writing to the rear end of the queue, and consumer will be consuming from the front of the queue. So we are keeping two index. One is P index, producer index, and C index. And let's define them, what actually they mean. So P index is an index where the last item was. It is a position of the last item. And C index is the position from where the consumer is going to delete the next item. So this is the code I have written. Do you think this code is correct? So this producer is producing item again and again. So it creates a new item, increments the value of the P index, writes into the buffer. Do you think this code is correct? Akash Sharma. Akash. Akash Sharma, are you sleeping? Most probably, yes. Nilesh Thawani. Nilesh? Nilesh Thawani. Can you switch on your microphone and try to answer the question? Do you think this code is correct? You have to think in the perspective that these are concurrent processes and contexts which can take place at any time. Nilesh, is this code correct? Okay, think what can happen if the context which takes place before producer, so producer increments the P index, but before it could put that item into the buffer, consumer gets a chance. So now the P index has been incremented, so consumer feels that one item has been produced, but item has not actually been returned to the buffer. So consumer may end up reading a value which is incorrect. So an item which was not yet produced, something garbage, it can read something garbage. Why it can happen? So let's try to look at the example. Let's say initially the buffer is empty. So producer produces the first item, increments the pre-index, so P index now becomes 0, and then it will write the buffer. It will be good. And then it writes the buffer. So now C index is equal to 0. This is the index from where the consumer will delete the next item. Okay. So initially the buffer is empty. So the very first position to which the producer will write will be 0. So naturally, if one item has been written into 0, then consumer can consume it. So that's why I put the equal to sign. Okay. So the very first item is being written. C index equal to 0, P index equal to -1. At this line of the producer, P index will become 0. And before it could write to that into the buffer, context which takes place. So when consumer runs, it finds that P index equal to 0. So it will actually assume that item has been written. So it will try to read whatever is there in the buffer. So whatever is in there is buffer is not the correct item. So but still it will end up reading an invalid item. Okay, this is how the problem could occur. So let's change the solution. First we write the item and then we increment the index. Is this a correct solution? So in this case, even if buffer is written, the item is written and P index is not updated, if consumer gets the chance, it will not read the item. So it is, let's say there is only a buffer is empty and producer writes first item, or okay, or whenever the buffer becomes empty and producer writes the next item, quite possible when the consumer gets the chance, it will find that there is no item. So consumer will be delayed. So consumer may not consume an item till it has been produced. That could be the problem. Yes. Now in this particular case, we are assuming that buffer is unbounded. No, it is not a problem. That's what I said. So there will be a delay, but there is no problem. So the solution is correct. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So there is no race condition. But we are assuming that buffer is bounded. Now why? So now let's look at what is happening here. If you look at consumer is reading from C index and writing to C index. Producer is writing to P index only. Reading and writing to P index only. So as far as producer is concerned, it is writing and reading to it is writing and reading to P index, and consumer is writing and reading to C index. So as far as the sharing of the variable is concerned, the only shared variable is P index, which is shared between producer and consumer, And the race condition can be avoided because producer is writing to it. Consumer is always reading from it. The race condition arises when both of them trying to read it. So of course, there could be a problem here that producer has written, but consumer might be reading the old value. So even if the consumer is reading the old value, there is no problem. Consumer will not consume the item that has been produced. So consumer may end up consuming. So it is quite possible that consumer may not be consuming the items even if it has been produced. So, but that will result in a delay. Otherwise, it is okay. But what if this is a finite buffer? If there is a finite buffer, then of course we need to change our code. Now, producer can produce only if the buffer is empty. It has at least one slot, one empty slot available, and consumer can consume only if buffer has something written into it. So producer has to stop when the buffer becomes full, and consumer has to stop when the buffer becomes empty. So again, we can keep another count to indicate how many items are there. And let's assume that bounded buffer of size m. Now there is a problem. Now if you look at this count variable, again if you look at p index, producer is only reading and writing to this value. If you look at c index, consumer is only reading and writing from this value. But if you introduce a third variable called count to indicate how many items are there, both of them are writing to it, and this can create a race condition. And that's why it can lead to problems. I will leave it as an exercise for you to find what the race condition could be. So it is quite possible producer is producing an item, return the item to the buffer, increment its p index, and when it comes to change the count, so now let's say already the number of items are 4, and both of them are reading the value 4. But when consumer writes it, it becomes 5. But before it could write it, let's say consumer is also writing the same thing. So both of them read the value 4, but consumer is the last to update, so it will appear as if there are only 3 items. So some of the item would be missed, and that could be the problem. So producer might be producing it, but consumer will assume that there are only 3 items left. So this could actually this could actually lead to the problem. Okay. What I will pose as an exercise is that can you actually, instead of using count, can we use it as a circular array and use only p index and c index to check this full buffer and empty buffer condition? I want you to write the code. We don't want to use count. We want to use only p index and c index. And using the indices p index and c index, as we use in a circular implementation, circular array implementation of the queue, we change these conditions, check for the condition of buffer empty and buffer full, and see whether we can arrive at a solution and if this solution is free of race condition or not. I want you to do that. So one of the solutions which is proposed in modern operating system by Tenenbaum is this. So when the count becomes n, process goes to sleep, and then producer if the buffer is not full, the producer will write, increment the count. The count becomes 1, it will wake up the consumer. Okay. So this is again not a good solution, but because count is still not protected. But let's say we use this solution, and let's assume that count can be incremented or decremented correctly by using some atomic construct. So let's assume that. So what happens when the buffer is full, producer goes to sleep, and when count equal to 1, it wake up the consumers. Okay, something like this. And let's forget about this count equal to count plus 1 and count equal to count minus, which would create the race condition. What happens in this particular case? This process, if the sleep and wake up are not atomically implemented, then this could lead to a problem in which what will happen, consumer runs, finds that nothing has been written to the buffer, goes to sleep. But before it could actually sleep, sleep is also requiring some operation on behalf of operating system. Okay, so sleep unless you write it correctly, it is not an atomic operation. So unless it is implemented correctly by operating system, it may be not an atomic solution. So that consumer has started to sleep but is not completely sleep. So now what will happen at this point? Then producer gets a chance. It writes one item. Because it has written the first item, it wakes up the consumer. But it is waking up something which is not yet sleep. So this signal sent by producer is lost. And then consumer goes to sleep. And count is now 1. So now when the producer continues, it will never wake up the consumer because count is already 1. So it will continue, and ultimately it will also go to sleep. So this could be a problem. So both producer and consumer goes to sleep, and this is a kind of deadlock. So let's try to find the solution by using semaphores. We are assuming a single producer and a single consumer, and we're going to use 2 semaphores. Both the semaphores are integer semaphore. So fill count actually shows how many positions are filled in the buffer, and empty count shows how many positions in the buffer are empty. So naturally, initially the number of empty slots in the buffer is equal to size of the buffer, and number of filled slot is equal to 0. So producer will keep on running infinitely, consumer will keep on running infinitely. So consumer produces an item, then it checks, I should say wait. Then it waits on empty count. Waits on empty count means if the buffer is full, empty count is number of empty slots. So if the number of empty slot is equal to 0, so naturally if the number of empty slots is equal to 0, it means the buffer is full. Okay. It will wait on empty count. Initially, empty count is equal to a positive number. So naturally, the producer need not have to wait. It will put item into the buffer, and then it will signal the consumer. So before entering the critical section, the producer will check the number of empty counts. And when the number of empty count becomes 0, producer will be forced to sleep. So when the buffer becomes full, the producer will be forced to sleep. And whenever producer produces an item, if it is able to produce an item, it will actually signal consumer. Now this signal consumer will be effective only if the fill count is equal to 0 and consumer goes to sleep. So consumer will be woken up, and then it will remove the item from the sleep, and it will signal producer because now the slot has become available. So when the slot becomes filled, producer signals consumer, and when the slot becomes empty, consumer signals producer. And both of them, the producer waits on full buffer. So when the buffer becomes full, the producer has to sleep, and it can be woken up only when the consumer consumes something. Similarly, if the buffer is empty, the consumer goes to sleep, and it can be woken up only when the producer writes something into the buffer. So this is the correct solution for producer-consumer problem. Now, this solution would work only if there is single producer and single consumer, because why that would be that be the scenario? Because both of them will be using different indices to write and read from the buffer. So there will not be any conflict. But if there are multiple producers and multiple consumers, then naturally multiple producers are changing the value of P index and multiple consumers are changing the value of C index, and that could create a problem. So in that particular case, we have to actually ensure that whenever the shared resource buffer is accessed, basically the index into that buffer is accessed, we have to protect it by a critical section scenario. So we are using, so this is our critical section for the producers. So we use a down, sorry, I should not be using down. Wait and signal mechanism. So down is basically reducing the value of I wrote something wrong. I'll correct it. Wait. Okay. So this is ensuring, this is our critical section now, which is changing the, reversing the signals, changing the order of the signal here and here will not have any impact, but I still would like to keep it in the nested order. So this is producers consumers problem. There are multiple producers and multiple consumers. So naturally you have to protect your critical section through another binary semaphore. So here mutex is a binary semaphore and initial value of the mutex would be, if we keep mutex equal to 0, the problem would be that the producer when it tries to produce the first item, the very first item, it will be waiting on the mutex and it cannot proceed any further. And the consumer is waiting on fill count and this will be a deadlock. So when we want semaphore as a critical section scenario, in a critical section scenario, the value of the semaphore has to be set to 1. And for using it as a condition variable, we have to set it to 0. So that's what you need to understand. So I'll be stopping at this point and we start from the readers, writers, and other synchronization problems from next class. But there is an online free book available known as Little Book of Semaphores. So I would, I mean, you should actually try to download that book and go through that book. So this book actually gives you a very interesting problem. So that will give you an idea of how this problem can be used. If you have to write program to solve those problems, how would you do that? So the next problem that we'll be discussing will be readers and writers problem. So in readers and writers problem, there are multiple writers which are writing, and so they go to the library to write the book. And when a writer is in the library, then other writers cannot come into the library, and other readers can also not come to the library because someone is writing, so it is modifying something, so only one of them can do it. And if a reader is in a library, then other readers can also come because they are just reading. So this is an interesting problem, and a practical application of this problem is reservation system. So in the reservation system, there might be multiple servers which might be receiving requests from the reader, and So at a time, only one server will be making modification to the data. It will be reserving the ticket for some of the user. But there might be other readers, other users which are just browsing through the data. They are not actually making any reservation. They are just checking whether the reservation is available or not. So online ticket booking for railways or airline actually comes into this category of example. There is that you are trying to write to a printer. Printing to a printer is an example of that. So we will start from readers writers problem. There are 3 different versions of solving that problem. Each version has its problem. So we'll be discussing that, and we'll be talking about sleeping barber problem, and then an interesting problem called cigarette smokers problem, and you will try to read some books, some problems for you from your book of Little Book of Semaphores, and try to solve them. So I'll stop at this point, and if there is any question, you can ask it, and I'll be sharing the slides. Generally, input-output bursts are always managed in first come, first served basis. I think I wrote it somewhere in the. I think I wrote it somewhere in the slide server. Generally, they are on first in, first out basis. So it is not possible to manage them in round robin manner. So it is generally first come, first served. So the complete input-output request of one device will be served, and then we'll go to the next device because we don't want to create problems there. Any questions now? Any other questions?
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you please allow us to code in other languages also other than C?
I never said that you have to write in C. If you are
Ma'am,
with
the assignment you posted on
restriction, you can code in Java, you can code in Python, you can code
okay.
in C++, but please do not copy it from anywhere. हाँ.
Yes, ma'am.
मैं भी ले लूँ. हाँ. ठीक है ना?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
But you have to do it independently. I would rather that you do it in different language than C. But why I said C was because this implementation of system calls. Of course, you can do it in Python also, but they are slightly different. The name nomenclature is slightly different, and so you have to actually search for that. For otherwise, when you go for C for Linux, then you go when you search for man. Let's say if you go for search for manual sleep, and generally the C would have the same implementation. The name would be same in the C library. It can slightly can change for Python and all that. So you have to actually go through that. So I have no problem. You can do it in Python. You can do it in Java. You can do it in C++. Or if you have got any other language, please let me know which language you would prefer. I don't think you are going beyond Python. I think you all are thinking of Python rather than C or C++, if I'm not wrong. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So this week would be again hectic week. I'll be giving you lots of assignment because we have a lot to cover now. But I don't think there should be any problem because you have done this in concurrent programming. Am I right? Hello? So can you let me know? I asked you the very first question, what kind of lab assignments did you do in the concurrent programming? But none of you have answered it, so I'll assume that you have done a lot. So I'll be giving the similar assignment to you. That will be based on implementation of producer consumer, implementation of other synchronization problem. But I think I'm missing something. We did CPU scheduling, and then I think what we discussed in the last class. It will come to me. Okay. So anyhow, have a good day. Happy Republic Day, and enjoy your time. If there are any questions, you can always WhatsApp me. So I'll be closing this session if there are no more questions. So see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Bye.